Hi, Erin, and hi, everybody. It's nice to see many familiar names and see many familiar faces, as well as some new folks I don't know. Glad to have this time with all of you. So just to cue this up, I want to make sure you understand how this works. Yesterday evening, I get a set of questions, and I did spend a little time, thinking through them and preparing some brief slides. And then this morning, I got some more questions, and I have been in meetings, so I haven't really been able to make slides on those. But this is very like impromptu, unrehearsed. So it's not like some other presentations that you've seen me give, for those of you who are new. That you've seen me give online or that you've seen me give in previous sessions. This is very like just off the cuff. So I'm just managing expectations. So if you're thinking afterward, what is wrong with Nell Duke? She's just yammering on without a beautifully organized and prepared slide deck and presentation. It's because that's not actually the intent of this Q&A. So, all right. With that said, I'm going to start by addressing the questions that had come in as of yesterday, and then I will tackle as many as I can get through from what came in this morning. So I'll share screen and take you to this deck, which has the very exciting title of Q&A. Oh, wait, this is not how you want to see it, right? Stop share. Why did it do that? Okay, let's try again. Sorry. Oh, I just want to just see it like a regular presentation. Oh, I know why. Sorry, my bad. I'll fix it. It's because I have a second display plugged in today. Sorry. Okay, now this should do it right. Yay. Okay. All right, so here was first question that I wanted to address from the ones I got yesterday. It says, when we were discussing high frequency words / sight words in our breakout group, a concern arose about giving students irregular or infrequent sounds for spelling patterns. The question was, won't this confuse the learner? The example would be telling students that the A in was said Participants were wondering if telling this to young learners would confuse their learning about the regular short A sound of ah. How would you answer this question if a teacher brought up this concern? Good one. So this gives me an opportunity to talk about a very important area of research in children's word learning and spelling development, which is called set for variability. Set for variability. Sometimes you'll read it as set for diversity, but usually set for variability. And what this is about is how readers develop an understanding that our language in English does not have a tight one-to-one correspondence between sound and letter. That is, that we have in this language multiple ways to spell a given sound in most cases, and also that any given spelling could have multiple pronunciations in this language. And so researchers have for some time studied how set for variability, that understanding, plays into literacy development. And what we see in the research is that readers with a stronger set for variability, that is, readers who have a better understanding of the more complex relationship between sound and symbol in English reading and spelling, tend to be more effective readers, actually. And so on the contrary, not only is this not confusing to young learners if presented correctly, but could be, in fact, good for young learners. You don't really want to set kids up in learning English with thinking that they're going to have this tight, clean relationship that always exists. It's just going to make it harder for them later when we start to get into more complexity. Plus, it's just, everyday life will disabuse them of that notion, quite quickly. Like the first time in Michigan that you take little kids to the store Myers and it's spelled MEI, which is pronounced my, and then ers, which is written Jers. Like the first time that kids see a Myers sign when they are working on decoding, you've already set them up for the idea that there are complex relationships. So that is why we don't worry too much about doing this. We can say something like, usually a spells the a sound, or we could say something like, you've been learning that a spells the a sound, but in this word, a spells the sound. So by framing it in that way, you're not like, shaking their confidence completely, but you are setting them up for the idea that, again, you need to have quite early in English that that in fact our sound symbol relationships are not 100% predictable and definitely are complex. If you want to learn more about this, I'll just show you, share screen again, but I'll take you over to my here. If you would like to learn more about this topic, if you go into Google Scholar and I thought I saved this for you, maybe I didn't. If you type in set for variability and reading, or set for variability and decoding, or anything like that, you're going to get some many hits from different scholars. This is a nice piece, for example, from 2022. And this one might be a particular interest to you because it's more of a training study. So, looked at instruction with beginning readers around, sort of being ready for set for variability, just to be really concrete about search terms. Oh no, shoot. I think I said set for variability reading in Google Scholar to get to these. And just so this doesn't all sound like so abstract and academic, like when you say to kids, if you use this cue, try a different sound, that's set for variability. So if you teach that G has two sounds that it will commonly represent, sometimes G, sometimes J, typically depending on the vowels that follow it, that's set for variability. So you're already probably promoting this instruction as a coach, and just maybe didn't know that was the name for it. And so again, no worries about doing that full graphophonemic analysis of words that aren't spelled as would be expected, and presenting to children how the sounds are represented in those particular words. Okay. The nenext question that I wanted to cover here, how long does it typically take before the curriculum has studies showing its effectiveness? For example, well, let me just stop there for 1 second and just say, remember that once we do studies, they may not show effectiveness. Sometimes studies show lack of effectiveness. But anyway, for example, we were talking about UFly. The university says the program is research-based and evidence-based. We thought there were studies showing effectiveness of some of the components of the program, but we didn't think the whole program had the kind of studies done that you'd mentioned, at least at this point. What are your thoughts on situations like this? Right. So this is, just an ongoing challenge in our field, that it does typically take quite a while before a curriculum has been tested extensively in research. And yet, if you wait to use a curriculum until it's been tested extensively in research, that by the time that happens, there's probably been new research out that would lead us to tweak certain things in the curriculum. That's one. And two, standards may have changed. So, for example, if you think about when Common Core came out, at that point, there were all of these curricula that had been tested in research, but they weren't necessarily aligned with Common Core. So then we sort of had to start the whole process over again. And so it does typically take a while. And I personally, and researchers don't necessarily agree on this, so I should say that, but I personally do not think that whether the curriculum as a whole has been tested in research should be a requirement. In other words, I don't think you should limit yourselves to looking only at curricula that have been tested as a whole in research. But what I do think is that when you have a curriculum that hasn't been tested as a whole in research, that makes the responsibility that much greater to make sure that the curriculum does in fact align with research, right? And we have over the years in our work with the coaching network, we've definitely worked together on how to analyze curricula for research alignment. I also did just make a tool for another state. Sorry, let me think how to get to this quickly. I made some tools for the state of Oregon because of some new legislation that we were able to pass there. And I was going to show you a few of those tools. And I have them linked in this, a link to them in the slides. But one of the things we made was this little one pager called Curriculum Review Tools that has links to 3 rubrics that exist for evaluating curriculum alignment to research supported practice. This is one that many of you have heard me recommend before. It's been around for a while. I still think it's a really good tool to take a look at from federally funded regional education lab. This is a brand new tool that came out last month from Knowledge Matters, and I had an opportunity to have some influence on the tool, and do recommend taking a look at that. And then a third one that you may be familiar with is a tool from the Reading League. And so those 3, not just one of them, but looking across those could be a really good tool for all of you if you are evaluating the alignment of a curriculum to research where the curriculum as a whole, as in the scenario in the question, has not yet been tested in research. And then just as a reminder, our essentials themselves provide a lovely mechanism for curriculum evaluation. You know, just seeing whether a curriculum is aligned to the essential instructional practices is a good tool as well. Okay, next. In your work in schools, are you seeing any trends that you think coaches might also be seeing that you want to give advice around? For example, if you've been working with teachers to bring student identity into their decisions about how they set up their classroom spaces or how they use instructional materials, do you have any examples of conversations where you've coached a teacher or a group that would be helpful for us to hear? So there's a lot in this one. And what I thought I would do is talk a little bit about children's roles in the classroom. Something that I've been noticing in a number of classrooms, well, I shouldn't put it that way. I think what I'll say is one way in which I have noticed that classrooms vary quite a bit, and I should say I've mainly been hanging out in kindergarten classrooms this fall, so in which kindergarten classrooms vary quite a bit, is in the roles that children are given inside the classroom. So I've been in kindergarten classrooms, I'm thinking of one where the teacher did absolutely everything. Like the teacher was the one doing all the tech support for every kid who needed tech support. The teacher was doing all of the teaching when kids were stuck on something. The teacher was the one helping them. The teacher was wiping down the tables after children had breakfast. I mean, every role in the classroom was being done by that teacher. And I both admired that in terms of just, you know, such hard work and so much that that she's doing for children. And I also thought, this isn't giving children as much of a sense of responsibility, and it's not allowing them to be developing an identity as part of a classroom community, an identity as people who have knowledge and skills and assets that they can use to help others. So in contrast, in some classrooms, children are each other's tech support. There may even be, I was on a classroom job board where one of the items was iPad assistant. So that week, whoever the iPad assistant was, that was their job to go around and provide tech support. I've also worked with teachers where they'll deliberately group kids so that one of the children in that group they know is particularly tech savvy, like that sort of part of that child's, persona, so that they can be helping with that. That children are, that their first impulse is to ask a colleague or classmate for help instead of always going straight to the teacher, where their kids are helping to take care of the room by doing things like wiping down the tables and so forth. And what I notice is that I think in those classrooms, children tend to have more of a sense of self-efficacy, to use the fancy motivation word for it. But in other words, they feel like they can do stuff. They are leaders. They can help one another. They're part of the community. And so that's one area where I've seen a lot of variance recently and have been leaning into a bit of coaching. A second concrete thing I wanted to talk about that I've been promoting in kindergarten classrooms this fall and have seen some really lovely examples of is in alphabet instruction. Instead of just using whatever alphabet keywords come with the program, teachers going out in the community, in the local community, and looking for photographs they can take of words that have that particular letter representing the target sound or sounds being taught. And then they post those photos. Helping kids see that, print is all around them, right in their local community. Every community has that strength or value of, having print, having places where there are words to read and letters to process. And so I've seen some really nice examples of that in classrooms, which I really appreciate very much. And a last thing I wanted to mention, again, that we've been promoting and some work we've been doing in kindergarten classrooms is opportunities for guest speakers. And having those guest speakers not necessarily be, from the traditional, like from the local university or whatever, but guest speakers that are, family members, that are, members of the local community right around the school, who are able to share their expertise or funds of knowledge, for those of you familiar with that work, in the classroom. And that's so affirming to children, not only of the value and strength in their own local community, but also of their identity. For example, seeing guest speakers who share the same racial or ethnic background, seeing guest speakers who look like the people in their own families. Like, there's so much value there. So those are some examples for that question. All right. So with the updated pre-K and K3 essential instructional practices in early literacy, adding the section on enabling conditions, have you seen any examples of these conditions being lived out in the schools that you visit that would be helpful for us to hear? We have been learning about the first enabling condition. So I wanted to combine this with the first part of the previous question that asked about trends. And I want to talk about catch a bubble. Now, just by show of hands on your little buttons there, your reaction buttons, how many people have heard a reference to catching a bubble in the last month? Can raise your hand or smile. Or, yeah, I would love someone to study how these things happen, where like something catches on. Because there are some things I'd like to catch on that I've been trying to get to catch on for 30 or so years, and they don't catch on. But somehow certain things, and catch a bubble is right there with it. Like, I never heard of catch a bubble 5 years ago. And now I'm basically not in a school where I don't hear talk about catching a bubble. So I just think that's interesting. I, with a sociologist, would study that, like what that is. Anyway, so what I wanted to say about catch a bubble is that it seems like a nicer way to say be quiet, but it's still, oh, sorry, I see in the chat. So catch a bubble is a way that I'm hearing many teachers ask kids to be quiet. So the idea is you're catching a bubble, like, oh, and then you walk down the hall. I hear it in reference to catch a bubble to go down the hall, but I also hear it in reference to catch a bubble on the rug. And So, yes, Kari says, I'm not a fan of Catch a Bubble. Yeah. So my point here is that it may seem like a more fun or friendly way to say be quiet, but you're still saying be quiet. Do you know what I mean? Like it's the underlying message is still be quiet. So one of the things that I notice about teaching in classrooms that have more of an asset orientation toward children is the belief that children's voices matter in our day-to-day life in schools. So there's more of a belief that it's not just the teacher who has all the knowledge and information and the kids who are supposed to sit there and passively receive that information, but in fact that children themselves have knowledge and understandings to bring to bear. Sometimes they know things actually that the teacher does not know even. So there's a difference when we have an asset orientation toward children, in my experience, in how much time children are given to talk. And that's a really interesting lens to bring to a classroom as a coach. How much time are kids actually being given to just talk? So, for example, are there think, pair, shares? Are there turn and talks? Are there small group opportunities for kids to problem solve? Are there opportunities where maybe a child comes up and does the daily weather or whatever is happening during calendar time instead of it's only always the teacher leading that? Like, are there opportunities for children to bring to bear their own voices and experiences? I think that's a big thing to look at. So Catch a Bubble I'm picking on it just because it sort of sounds better than it is, in the sense that, if we're asking kids to be quiet such a large portion of the time, we're sending a signal about the value of what they have to say. And we just want to make sure we're scrutinizing our day to make sure that A, kids really have these opportunities to talk to one another and so forth. And B, if we are asking them to be quiet, quiet down, catch a bubble, like, do we really need that? Like, is it a time where we actually need them to be perfectly silent? And so that's kind of a general thing around that. Two other things I wanted to share that relate, I think, to this sort of classroom dynamics and asset orientation toward children and their voices is just when children are being asked to quiet down, catch a bubble, whatever we're going to call it, when we're asking them to do that, do we give them a reason that lifts up voices? So, for example, some teachers I work with, some I've observed this fall, will say, what we need to, they usually don't say catch a bubble, but in the particular teachers I'm thinking of aren't big on that phrase, but we'll say, we need to be quiet so we can hear what Juan Carlos is saying. Do you see how that's different? Because you're asking them to be quiet, but not just to lift up your own voice or because we don't talk in the halls or whatever, but because we're lifting up the voice of one of the children in the classroom and we want to hear what that child has to say. Do you see how that's a little bit different? So I think there's that. Another place where I see this quite a bit, this sort of general shushing is, when kids are supposed to raise their hands to respond, and then a child is called on, and you know how it's so common for everybody else to go like, or the kids to be frustrated that they weren't the one called on. Two things about that. One is, would that have been a better think, pair, share moment? Like, if that many kids want to respond, is this a case where maybe we should create a different participation structure that allows more kids to respond? And two, if it is a moment where we really want to hear one individual child's voice across the whole room, I've saw a teacher not long ago, and I had not seen this before, sorry if you all have, but that the kids have been taught to cheer the kid who got called on. So instead of their immediate reaction being, "Ah," it was, "Yay, so-and-so." And I thought that was kind of neat. I don't know of any research on it, but I just thought it was a neat piece. Okay, so that's some examples of asset orientation between the previous question and this question that I wanted to share. All right, back to the slides. I made these yesterday. Oh, I don't know why I made this table yesterday for a completely different purpose, but I thought it a little bit related to this question, so I thought I would share it in case it's interesting to you. What I am doing here, I'm looking at CVC word weeding, so basically kindergarten, but what I made was a little table where it's like, if the child can do this, but isn't yet doing this, what might be some next steps you would take? So for example, if a child can look at the paper, but they're not yet trying to read the word, what would you do? Versus if, say, they're able to say some of the sounds in the word, but they're not yet saying all the sounds in the word, what might you do? And the reason I wanted to share this table with you is, do you see how the orientation is? It starts with a strength or an asset, like something the child can do. Then it points to something they're not yet doing. And notice that language there. It's not, but they can't. It's they're not yet, which reflects a certain orientation. And then next steps. And I made the same thing, which I'll share these slides with you in case you like them at all. But the same orientation for writing CVC words. And I just think that maybe, as we have discussed at previous occasions, assessment is one of the tools in this environment that I think often leads to a lack of an asset orientation toward children, or certain children in particular. So if we could make this a habit in our assessment work to, always lead with what the child can do and then something they're not yet doing, maybe that could help. Okay, next one. How do we get teachers, especially newer teachers, to put in the necessary time for planning for instruction? Is this a coach dilemma or an admin dilemma? Because of time constraints, which essential practice would you choose as a focus if you are a new kindergarten teacher of English language learners? I know they're all important, but there's only so much time in the day. Great. So on the planning part of this question, I just wanted to, first of all, I think we all know US teachers generally do not have enough planning time. We have less planning time than teachers in other industrialized and high-performing nations. It's completely unfair. And that is just like a baseline point to make. That said, in terms of encouraging planning time, the first question that I would ask yourselves is, what are they needing to spend that planning time on? So if you have newer teachers that, for example, are having to make up their own lessons, that to me is a concern, because all of that time you're spending having to design lessons, find materials, figure out the scope and sequence, etc., is time that actually other people could do, right? Other people could make those lessons. And if we want the lessons to be highly research aligned, probably other people should be the ones making those lessons. And then what the teacher, particularly the newer teacher, is able to do is to spend that time not writing lessons from scratch or inventing lessons, but able to work on the enactment, preparing for the enactment of that lesson and preparing for how to be responsive in that lesson to the children in front of them and their responses to the lesson. So the one thing I would start to scrutinize is just, what is that planning time being spent on, and how can we try to make sure that that time is spent in the way that's going to be the biggest payoff, and that the new teacher is sort of best positioned to be able to do, given their existing skill set. So that's the first thing I wanted to say on that. Is it a coach dilemma or an admin dilemma? It's probably both. So it's an admin's job to, try to create a schedule and it's central office's job to try to create a contract that, provides for an adequate, or at least as much planning time as possible. I think it's a coach dilemma how to teach protocols for planning. So what are the things that we look at when we're planning? And it's a coach dilemma ensuring that teachers have, existing lesson plans to start from. In terms of which essential practice, I think you all know that's such a hard question for me in general, but I did, because it's like picking among your, which one is your favorite child or something, but they are indeed all important. But I did want to share a research tested instructional model. And some of you have heard me talk about this model, research on this model before, but I don't think you've seen me seen this particular flyer. No, sorry, it's not that I don't think you have. I know that you have not seen this flyer before. Let me pull it up here. There is a research tested approach to coaching teachers who have a number of multilingual learners in their classrooms. It's a collaborative, it's a coaching model that involves the classroom teacher plus the multilingual learner specialist within the building. And it's been shown to be effective in multiple research studies. Where is it? Here we go. Now I need to make this bigger. And I forgot how to do that. Oh, because it's covered up by your smiling faces. Sorry. Okay. So this is a document. Again, this is in this folder in case it's useful to you. The first page of the document is a table about characteristics of professional learning that works and doesn't work that I developed based on a review of research in this area, as well as some other research. And look there, a little reference to the coaching essentials, even though this is for the state of Oregon. And you're all familiar with this study as well. I think we've referenced it a number of times, a meta-analysis on the impact of coaching. Anyway, and then this section is things to avoid in professional learning. And but what I wanted to get you to is page 4, one example of a page 3, one example of a professional learning program that has been tested in research and found to be effective. And it's called BELLA, Bridging English Language Learning and Academics. So here it is. If you are interested, you can learn more from this flyer. It's developed by researchers at Duke University and the University of Delaware. But my point in all this is that the BELLA program, or BELLA approach, as some of you know from past presentations, takes the approach of just selecting a small set of high leverage practices. That is a small set of practices that we know help support children's development, and that you can use sort of across a number of contexts of the day. And the practices that they have chosen, and I can get you a study or a slide that has a list of all of them, but what they've done is chosen a set of strategies that kind of cuts across different essentials, really. So like they have a vocabulary development strategy on the list. They teach blend as you go, or what I've called slide as you go, which is a decoding strategy. So they kind of have a few from a lot of different places. So one way I might answer this question, which essential practice, is to actually maybe pick an element from a few different essential practices to start. For example, maybe picking ways in which we build vocabulary, the vocabulary building portions of an interactive read aloud, picking which specific prompts you're going to use when children are stuck on a word, and picking goal setting and writing, or something like picking 3 from across essentials, like picking 3 sort of bullets, if you will, or specific practices, and maybe starting with those. It might be a little bit faster on ramp for than just picking one essential instructional practice, given that we know that one of the characteristics of effective instruction for multilingual learners in particular is that it's very important that it be multifaceted and not just focus on vocabulary or just focus on decoding or just focus on writing or the like. So that's my suggestion there. I hope that makes sense. Okay. I better move along. Okay. So notable research studies that have come out in the last year or so that I think people in leadership roles should know about. I loved getting this question last night because it has been like a really hot week in research. So in fact, I didn't have to think about the last year. I just had to think about the last week. It came out over the weekend, but I just saw it yesterday because I had COVID. But there's a new study out on bookworms, the bookworms curriculum, and showing its effectiveness. It was published in Scientific Studies of Reading. I have this hyperlinked, so when you get these slides, you'll be able to take a look at it. And I think, whether or not you use bookworms, you still might want to, at least read the abstract of the study, because bookworms, is a specific curriculum, but there are some broader ideas about bookworms, such as differentiated instruction, opportunities for small group instruction, a focus on knowledge building, and a focus on, high volume reading, that's relevant whether you're using bookworms or not. So that came out. Friday, I don't know if it came out on Friday, but I saw it on Friday, a new meta-analysis on tutoring, which was an exciting thing to see, because I know so many districts around the country, particularly in sort of post-COVID context, have really been focusing on tutoring. And to say that meta-analysis came out just in the nick of time is an understatement, because I was literally finishing on Friday a one-pager. It's in that same folder that I've been showing you here. I did a one-pager on tutoring, and well, it's really a two-pager, I guess, but so it was perfect because I was able to look at that meta-analysis that had just come out along with this older document on tutoring, and just able to tweak this section with the characteristics of effective tutoring. So if you are, doing tutoring in your district, or you're thinking about tutoring, this might be a useful, set of key characteristics. And then on the next page, I gave some examples of tutoring programs that have been shown to be effective in research. And I put the cost per child. I figured that out because I thought that might be useful information. So here you go with a set of, well, this one won't be as relevant to you because it's Oregon specific, but all the rest of them are national programs. So they're just meant to be examples. It's not an exhaustive list, but examples of tutoring programs that have been shown to be effective in research. Okay, back to the slides. So another study that came out in the last week is this one, the achievement effects of scaling early literacy reforms. Now, this is a working paper, so I just wanted to remind everybody what that means is this has not been peer reviewed yet. It's not been peer reviewed and published in a journal, so we're always careful when we are looking at a paper that hasn't yet been peer reviewed. But the history of this paper that I wanted to just share briefly. I think some of you know I had the opportunity to participate some time ago with another Michigander, Dr. Lauren Katz, in a lawsuit against the state of California for failure to provide children with the right to literacy. And that lawsuit settled out of court for $53 million. And this paper is a study of the impact of that lawsuit, or the impact of the money on the districts that received it, or the schools that received it, to see whether it made a difference. And what they found was that it did make a difference in children's literacy achievement. And the paper goes into what the things were that the schools did with the money to help support development. And you'll all be shocked to hear that they spent the money largely on what? Oh, coaching. Yes, coaching and professional learning and intervention. So there you go. But you can read a little more detail if you would like to in that paper that came out in the last week. I also tweeted something in the last week that people seem to have found interesting. This is an older study. This is from like 2019, but I'm just putting the tweet here, Facebook post, in case you haven't seen it. If you are on Twitter or Facebook, please follow me because I tweet about studies almost every week. But this is just a very interesting piece where they looked at brain scans of children, whether reading narrative text or informational text, and found that their brain activity is actually different depending on the genre. And that is just really nice verification for a lot of essential instructional practices and other guidance for teachers around the importance of genre specific instruction, like teaching the specific structures of particular genres, asking different kinds of questions for different genres, and so on. Okay, 3 minutes. So that ends this deck. And then in terms of the questions that came up this morning, I wish I had more time with you all. It's so hard. I did have a few I thought I could answer quickly. So I'm going to go over to those here. Is right, not this one. Where is my sticky note? Levels. So I noticed this cluster of questions about levels. And I think the gist of it is, how can we get people to stop leveling children? And or just move away from leveling. And I wanted to tell you that I have no idea. I've been saying this for I don't know how long, and we said it so strongly in the 2016, I thought, in the 2016 essential practices and in the professional learning and the coaching institutes and everything, not to level kids. We had that whole activity. Some of you have been around for a while might remember this whole activity we had that Susan Lallier had this wonderful data where you could look at all these different assessment results for kids, and then without looking at the level, we had people look at the assessment data and group kids, and then look at the level and find that the levels didn't match up with the groupings, that if you really grouped based on strengths and needs, it wouldn't map onto levels. We had that whole activity. We did so many things, and I don't know what else we can do. So I'll just underscore that children are not, it's not appropriate to put a level on a report card. Fountas and Bedell themselves say that. It's not appropriate to say a child is just a particular reading level. Reading level varies based on lots of things. And reading level is, as the essential instructional practice number 3 says, not the primary mechanism or a mechanism for grouping kids. So, that's that one. The next one I wanted to address quickly was about the literacy landmarks. I can't remember where that is in here, but I haven't finished. I have worked on the literacy landmarks, but I have not finished the work I've been doing. So I will try to move that up on my massive to-do list. Thank you for the prompt and the suggestion that may be helpful. And then I wanted to hit the ones around independent reading. Where is that? Oh, here, following a presentation in August. So there are lots of rich questions here that I do not have time at exactly noon to get into, but I did just want to make sure to clarify for everyone that it's not that the 2016 essentials said to do independent reading and the 2023 essentials say to not do independent reading. That's not quite right. the 2016 essentials and the 2023 essentials both call for the same practice, which is for kids to not be sent off on their own to read entirely independently with no support, anything they want. So not DEAR time, not SSR time. What the essential practices call for in both cases is what's been called scaffolded independent reading, supported independent reading. It's basically, things like partner reading, reading where the teacher has provided some specific strategies to practice, rereading of texts that have already been studied. It's things like that. They're all listed in the document and in the module. And the reason that we pulled the word independent out is because we realized it's just an oxymoron. Like if you're saying it's partner reading, it's not independent. If you're saying you're reading something that you just got scaffolding on, that's not really independent. If you're saying reading, but the teacher's coaching you, it's not really independent. So we just pulled out the word, but the practices are essentially the same from 2016 to 2023. So I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you for all your great questions. I wish I had another 8 hours. I could probably make some real headway on them. But in the meantime, I hope that something of what I shared was useful. And I will share those slides with the wonderful team at MAISA in case any of the links inside there are useful to you for anything. So thanks a lot.
Thank you, Nell. Let's share our gratitude in the chat. This is really, really a gift. Thank you so much.